Hey, well, hello everyone. I'm Jennifer Jordan from Unabridged Press, and I have the luck of being the moderator of the Podcasters Unite panel here at the Disability Pride Virtual Pennsylvania, live out of Philadelphia and Toronto and lots of other places around Pittsburgh. So I'm just so glad everyone's here. Thank you. You're all awesome. So I am, I'll start by just saying a few words about who I am and where I came from. Originally from Pittsburgh, and during quarantine the last month, I've been in Florida, which is interesting. And Alisa Grishman and I started a podcast a month or so ago, sorry, in March, called A Valid Podcast. It was in response to COVID for the disability community, but it's evolved and we're starting season 2 tomorrow. And we're going to have more of a focus on people of color and in response to some of the next major news story that's evolved since we began. Tyler Polk is also part of our team. He works at the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University. We do workshops there, free workshops for people with disabilities who are interested in learning podcasting and media. It's the All Abilities Media Project. And at some point, I'll ask Tyler to talk about those opportunities and how we're doing some things online now and what other podcasts come out of the center. And with that, I will introduce everyone else here. Have about 4 computer screens going. So first we have Andrew Gerza. Andrew uses the pronouns he, him. He hosts Disability After Dark. He's a disability awareness consultant and cripple content creator. That's not triple content, that's cripple content creator. Although he's done triples, I'm sure, and all kinds of other things. In his work, he seeks to explore how the lived experience of disability feels as it interplays with intersectional, that's the second time today I've done that, intersectional communities. By using hashtags like Disability After Dark, Bear in a Chair, and Kiss a Queer Cripple. So a lot of hashtags. Oh, there's another one. Andrew, you're going to have to read the other one because I disabled with a AY. Yeah.
Disabled, like
okay.
Say, yeah.
Okay. He shares his lived experiences of disability, queerness, sexuality, and body image in a raw, vulnerable, and unapologetic fashion. He has presented all across North America on sex and disability as a queer crippled man. His written work has been highlighted in Out Magazine, The Advocate, and Huffington Post. He hosts the Disability After Dark podcast, which shines a bright light on sex and disability, while also aiming to explore parts of the disabled experience that we don't often hear about. And Andrew was the one I was alluding to, being in Toronto and loving 80s, 90s pop, bad Chinese takeout, and Netflix marathons. So welcome.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Hello.
Yeah. Emily Ladau goes by she, her, and is the co-host of the Accessible Stall, an activist, writer, and co-host with Kyle. And I lost the pronunciation. Could you say his last name?
Sure, Kachadurian, Kyle Kachadurian.
Excellent. The Accessible Stall. She describes it as a disability podcast hosted that keeps it real about issues in the disability community. Because we each have different disabilities and mobility levels, we approach everything we talk about with 2 unique, and I'm reading in her voice, obviously, this is not me, viewpoints, offering our listeners a fresh insight into how disability, into how differences in disability can color your experiences and perspectives. And we never shy away, she says, from offering being their honest opinion. And even if they go against the grain of the disability community at large, they always speak their minds. Excellent. Thank you for being here, Emily. And we also have Bri M, who is in the center box of my Hollywood squares, who hosts Power Not Pity. Bri uses the pronouns ze, zer, and is a Black Jamaican American queer non-binary disabled alien prince from the Bronx. Z is a podcaster and sound engineer who hosts, as I said, the podcast Power Not Pity. And I got to say, I listened to it and Power Not Pity. Did I do that right? Is it power, 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 not pity, pity, pity?
Power, 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 not pity, pity, pity. Yeah, totally.
Oh, it sounds fun. It's a show all about the lived experience of disabled people of color. Z started their radio adventures 10 years ago while in college. Over time, Z hosted 3 radio shows, loved every minute of it, stayed in the world of entertainment, busting ass, this is Z's words, not mine because I wasn't there, at music venues, working with record labels, and collaborating with cultural workers. Z was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 6 years ago, and since then has vowed to connect and lift up disabled people of color. And no, Alisa got excited there about multiple sclerosis. Bri has become a political agitator with a fierce desire to change the way disabled people of color are seen in mass media. The episodes serve as a vehicle for amplifying, preserving, and delighting in the voices of disabled people of color. Z is committed to interjecting disability justice in any conversation Z has and loves to cultivate collaborative energy with cultural workers, artists, and storytellers. I am going to just stop for a minute because I don't want it to be all me for a second. Before we get into the questions, though, I realized that I believe I heard on Emily's podcast the suggestion of doing visual descriptions on our audio. So could I go back to you, Andrew, for a second and ask you to describe yourself?
Yeah, I'm a disabled wheelchair-using white cis man with short brown hair, hazel eyes, and a cheeky, sexy smile.
Perfect. And Emily?
Sure. I am a white woman. I have brown curly hair and a ponytail. I'm wearing blue dangly earrings, and I'm wearing glasses that are black and turquoise rimmed. I have some pinkish purpley lipstick on and a blue v-neck shirt with a diamond pattern on both sleeves. And behind me is my bedroom. There's a little peacock in the corner because I love peacocks. And I am a wheelchair user, although you cannot see it right now.
Thank you. I'll jump in and say that I am a middle-aged woman. People could probably hear that in my voice, though, with a checked, I'm bad at describing myself. I think some kind of pattern here that's sort of a mix between arrow and houndstooth of black and white. And I'm white, and I have what I think is a fabulous microphone podcast setup, which Alisa also has. And I'm in my dad's office, and I have what's been called a busy but okay background with some actual record albums. Ty, would you mind hopping in and saying what you look like?
Sure. I'm an African-American male with I guess you could call it small afro, short flat top, a little bit of a scruff, because of the struggle. And I'm sitting in a chair right behind a nice painting of a bouquet of flowers. It's very ESPN-ish, but I probably need to acquire a bookshelf. Oh, and I'm wearing a maroon polo. I hope it doesn't look purple because sometimes in the light with my camera, it's just weird.
Okay. And Bri?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. I am Black, as Jennifer said, Black, Jamaican, American, non-binary, disabled alien prince, and I am wearing black rimmed glasses. I have black earrings on, and I have kind of like a boxy, not quite fade because of, lack of haircut, but don't judge me. Think Grace Jones. And I have a tapestry. It's blue and gold behind me. My mother got it from Ghana.
Perfect. And those earrings, I got to ask. There's something cool
Yeah.
going on there.
You like my earrings, Jennifer? Thank you.
Yeah.
They're like flat, and they're kind of like the squid kind of
okay.
octopus kind of vibe.
Fantastic. And moving on, we also have Tiffany Yu, who goes by she, her, founder of Diversability and host of Tiffany and You. That's the name of the podcast, not Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I love. Tiffany Yu is, again, the CEO and founder of Diversability, an award-winning social enterprise to rebrand disability through the power of community. The founder of the Awesome Foundation Disability Chapter, a monthly microgrant for disability projects that has awarded close to $40,000 to 40 projects in 8 countries. And her podcast, she is the host. She was appointed to the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Community by San Francisco Mayor London Breed in 2019. She started her career in investment banking at Goldman Sachs, working on over $14 billion of announced transactions. She's also worked at Bloomberg, Sean Diddy Combs' Revolt Media, and TV. Wow. And there's a whole lot of wow in here, actually, and a venture-backed real estate startup. And she's been featured in Marie Claire, The Guardian, Forbes, and has spoken at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, TEDx, Stanford University. She received her bachelor's from Georgetown and her master's from the London School of Economics. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thanks for having me. So I will visually describe myself. So I'm an East Asian woman in my 30s, but I do have the youthful glow of looking like I'm still in my 20s. I am wearing a bright coral top and red lipstick, and behind me is a kitchen and living room view separated by a partition.
Fantastic. Alisa Grishman, last but not least, you're going to have to talk a bit about the t-shirt, right? And you might even have to describe that a cat just went by you. Alisa Grishman is one of my favorite co-conspirators, disability advocate. She goes by she, her, lead analyst on A Valid Podcast. She is a disability activist, of course, advocate and activist, founder of something called Access Mob Pittsburgh, which is a great name. And they do great events like bar crawls, ramp crawls. And it's an advocacy group that uses positive approaches to making change, such as education and economic incentives. And again, ramp crawls. I'll say that a couple times because it's fun. A self-described shameless agitator, Grishman has also been arrested multiple times fighting for disability rights with ADAPT, National Advocacy Group. And along with her direct advocacy group, Grishman co-runs Ballots for Patients and Care to Vote, sister efforts that collect emergency absentee ballots from hospitalized people on election day and work with nursing and personal care homes to help residents register to vote and fill out ballots. She ran Pittsburgh's 88th anniversary rally, a celebration in 2017 for the 27th anniversary, featured local speakers and a keynote by our local rep, Dan Miller in Pennsylvania. She's been featured locally on our NPR affiliate, nationally in Huffington Post, Esquire. So I hope everybody's taking notes because you're going to have to read up later. We're going to have a quiz next week at this time. She has been chosen by Incline, which is a local publication, and S&T Bank as one of their Who's Next community leaders and activists. She went to Carnegie Mellon, and she lives in Uptown, Pittsburgh. Lisa, description.
Hello, everyone. So I am a fat white woman whose hair is, thanks to COVID, brown at the roots, then blonde, then blue. It's a little bit of everything. I am wearing a Mr. Rogers trolley shirt because I am from Pittsburgh and I wanted to bring a little bit of Pittsburgh into this big national event. Behind me are a couple of paintings and a sewing machine, and I am occasionally going to get cat bombed by a fluffy brown tabby cat who thinks that she's helpful.
So first, I'm going to ask each of you to say what motivated you to start your podcast. And this time I'm just going to go by the boxes a little bit. Emily, would you mind starting?
Yeah, happy to. So I am not the sole host of my podcast. Again, I co-host it with one of my best friends, Kyle Kachaturian, and we became friends in 2011. And from the very first moment that we met, I think we immediately clicked and had so much to talk about. And so finally, by 2016, we realized that we'd argued enough over disability issues because we both identify as disabled. So we decided to take it public. And at the time, there weren't a ton of disability podcasts. There certainly still aren't. I'm really happy to see that it is a growing niche for sure, but there were definitely some original people in the space, and so we were excited to play a small role in helping to fill that gap. And from there, it really just took off. So it started and continues to be a labor of love, but it really came from wanting to bring a disability narrative to a medium that wasn't giving disability enough attention, which honestly it still isn't.
Okay, I am going to, I think I can share my screen, and the world might have to, for a moment, see my screen, but I think everybody won't be too traumatized. I'm going to, first though, Emily, could you set up the clip that we're using from the accessible stall?
Yes, although I will say I got an email that there was maybe a last minute change.
Oh,
is that
okay.
happening?
Okay, let me play what we have, and then you can set it up.
Okay.
in reverse.
Okay,
And
I mean, if it is
yes,
the clip that I thought it is, then it's
it'll
good.
be a
If not,
surprise
it's a
to
surprise.
us all. Okay.
I'm ready.
Oops. Okay. So yes, sorry, that was not the clip I had in mind, but I will say that the clip I had in mind was one that you recommended the last show. I believe it was the last show you did. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Although were you just playing it because we were all pointing that we couldn't
You
hear?
didn't
So
hear. How sad. Okay. Let me work on that. But could you talk about the episode with, is it Darcy? I don't know how to pronounce the name.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about it, even if we don't end up listening to the clip.
It's really incredible.
So I take zero credit for that. Neither Kyle or I do. So we had DRC Neil on the podcast, and we realized that both Kyle and I, we have the privilege of having a platform. We are both white disabled people, and we wanted to pass the mic and amplify some of the missing conversation in the broader mainstream around the intersections between racism and ableism. And so DRC identifies as Black and disabled, and we asked him to talk with us about his experiences because we wanted to honor the moment without speaking for or over. And so it was really a powerful learning experience for us, just even in talking about some of the differences in circumstances growing up and recognizing the ways in which we as white disabled people don't tend to stop and think about how racism and ableism constantly intersect. So I don't want to take up too much more space talking about this as a white person, but I do want to ask that people consider, if nothing else, listening to that episode, because I think it raises some really crucial points around the connections between disability and race. But even more so than that, obviously right now is the time to be listening to podcasts from Black disabled creators. So that's all I'll say on that.
And I have to give a spoiler alert, because one of the central anecdotes in that piece was that he was, his house was burned. Am I right about that? Burned down?
I think it was broken into.
It was broken into, okay.
Yeah.
Because the Nintendo was gone. And that was, like, as a kid, the worst part of it sounded like. But it was, and the police knew for quite a while that the house in Youngstown was being cased. And handled the father who complained about it, said, like, you knew this all along. And they said, well, what did you expect? You're the only Black family in town, or something like that. It's
a really important listen. There's even a dichotomy between Kyle talking about his memories as they pertain to Nintendo and DRC's memories as they pertain to Nintendo. And so we're not just talking about disability, right? We're asking people to think critically about the fact that disability doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah, you just handled it so well. I really appreciate it.
All credit to DRC, but I really hope people will listen to that episode.
Yeah. And I am going to try again with my audio. But first I'm going to ask, let's see, who can I call on? Tiffany, could you talk about what motivated you to start your podcast?
Sure. So my podcast, similar to yours, Jennifer, is pretty new. I started it during this pandemic. We will launch episode 18 tomorrow. And I think for me, so my disability is not, I would not consider it to be disability specific. I really look at the podcast as a way, I think similar to what Emily said, to elevate voices and people's work who I think are really interesting. And so my podcast has been very COVID-19 focused. We talked about anti-Asian racism that was happening at the beginning of this pandemic, still is unfortunately just not getting the media attention, touching on mental health, what it's like to be a frontline worker. And now we've very much transitioned much of our conversations to be around anti-racism and all of anti-Black racism and all of the intersections around that as well. So we'll talk about mental health and healing through racial trauma. We've talked about, we did have Karima Batts on the show to talk about what it was like to be Black and disabled. And I think for me, it was just, podcasting is something I'd always been really curious about. And, you know, I've been following Andrew and Emily's work on their podcast for years. I think both of you were recipients of Awesome Foundation grants back in the day, very, very early on, maybe 3 years ago. And I chose podcasting because if I wanted to put something out, I wanted to make sure it was accessible. And I'm not sure I have figured out a way for video to be fully accessible just yet. And I think with a podcast, you have the audio component, you can put a transcript together, and you can work through different access needs that way. So that was the inspiration. I think it's been my podcast. I call it very DIY. I do all of the editing myself. I do everything myself. I think if this is something that I decide to take further out, I may start to outsource things, but I really just wanted to see if I could do it. And I've had a lot of conversations with other people within the disability community who just find access to equipment inaccessible, or don't know what Zencaster is, or what the post-editing process looks like. And literally, like, I don't have a microphone. I mean, I'm sure you can probably hear that in my audio quality, but I'm like, you know what? It's a pandemic. It's okay if I'm putting out imperfect things, as long as the conversations are important and people need to hear them. And I think for me in this podcast, we will continue to put episodes together as long as they're adding value or adding something to the conversation.
That's great. And I think for those listening strictly in audio, I just want to share that everybody was shaking their head in terms of, yes, quality before, perfection. Let not the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So I believe I'm going to be able to do it this time, to actually share your clip. We shall see. It always works in testing, let's see here. And I think you set up your clip.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Tiffany and You. This is your host, Tiffany Yu.
Sure.
I feel like that may actually be the whole episode, but
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was the one who edited it. You asked me to take it down from like 30 seconds. I did, and I cleaned it up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the edited version. Actually.
Again, surprise, everyone.
Today I have with me Dr. Victor Pineda. He's got quite a few different job titles. The main one is a professor at Berkeley. Is that correct?
That's right.
President and founder of World Enabled, and owns a film production company.
Filmmaker, storyteller, and overall human rights advocate.
Okay, that that was a little different. So would you tell us a little bit more? Because that got to be an interesting conversation. I know in the longer version, he spoke about his role model and how that helped. Could you just tell that little anecdote?
Yeah, so I loved I met Victor. So everyone on the show I've known for a couple of years, and Tiffany and Yu, every episode is named after my guest. So it's like Tiffany and Victor.
I love that.
And I had Victor on to talk about some of the work he was doing around looking into how local governments are dealing with pandemic response from a disability perspective, which pretty much meant not. But I asked him about, if I do interview someone, or I'm really fascinated by origin stories. And so I will always ask everyone about their origin stories. And the origin story is something I've learned from Rosemarie Garland Thompson, who is a professor at Emory. She wrote a really incredible piece in the New York Times called Becoming Disabled. I always have to give her a shout out. And the reason why I bring up origin stories is I asked Victor about his, and he told me there are 2 points of his origin story. The first was actually when he came to understand that he was disabled. And then the second was when he became proud of his disability identity. And he talked about attending this camp in California where he met Paul Longmore and saw someone who looked like him, who was very active in academia and really making an impact. And so he talked about that really being a turning point in his own disability narrative to really come to understand, hey, here is someone who could be a role model to me. Number one, role models are super important. And here is a community that I can root myself in of other people who have shared experience.
Who is Paul Longmore? I'm not sure, just so everyone knows.
I don't know if if anyone on the show can do this better than me, can you give me like a minute to look it up so that
we
I
can
do
come
this
back
correctly?
to that.
Yes.
Yeah, let's come back to that. Thank you. And meanwhile, I'm going to go on to Bri's clip. And I think for Bri, we actually have a clip that she's very familiar with. So let's see here. Additionally, there is somebody, just to call everybody's attention to the chat, there is a person in the chat on Zoom who's asking some questions about your podcasts. So you might be able to help there. And this is not Bri's. Okay, here's Bri's right here.
If you make it out of here without disability,
can you hear it, everyone? Okay.
Your life, I think it's a part that you miss because it teaches you something about yourself and other people. And now I know people are gonna be like, "Oh, this brother's crazy," like, you know what I'm saying? But I really do feel that, and I wouldn't have said that before, but I really do feel that now.
Bri, could you tell us what that was about, what that's from?
Definitely. So I decided to pick this clip because I thought, why not give people a treat? This is actually from an unreleased episode that I'm about to drop very soon. And it's a conversation between me and a Black disabled podcaster, also from the Bronx. His name is Thomas Reed, and his show is called Read My Mind Radio. That's REID, My Mind Radio. And it's a beautiful podcast. It's all about his journey into adjusting to blindness. And he's been blind for 15 years. And he talks to other blind folks about what their adjustment is like. And so this clip was actually from the end of the interview. And, the reason why I chose it is because it's not only a moment of revelation, right? Like realizing that disability is something that most, if not all, people will come to at the end of their lives. And also thinking about like what disability means to him and in relation to other people, and just the fact that it's taught him so much about himself and about other people. I just thought it was really interesting to put out there. And another thing I want to say about this clip is that it really shows his ability to be vulnerable with me. And I think, especially when you're like thinking about Blackness and disability and masculinity, you don't really see that very often, that kind of vulnerability. So I was hoping to kind of put that forth as well.
I loved it. It sounded so warm, and I just wondered if you would maybe say a word about how you create that kind of intimacy in what you do. Are you recording? How are you recording, over Zoom or that sort of?
Yeah, so before I found out about Zencaster, I used Zoom. And I'd use my own mic setup. Since Thomas is a podcaster, he sent his audio from his end to me as well. So I had both of those tracks, and that was really useful. So I think in terms of getting the right audio, right, the like good juicy sound bites, I think for me it comes from just kind of understanding that we're both authentic people, we're both genuinely interested in each other. And so the ways in which I ask people and kind of go back and forth is just from just trying to understand where this person is coming from and the best way that I can tell their story. So I've been interviewing people now for decades, and so I think it just comes from like trial and error, and laughing at people's cheesy jokes also helps.
Perfect. Perfect. And yeah, did I ask? I don't think I got to ask you what's got you started, but it seems like you started a long time ago. It seems like there are many starts for you and many iterations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since I became disabled in 2014, that's kind of when I started to listen to podcasts, and being kind of isolated and being in bed life for a long time, I turned to podcasts to sort of feel comforted and supported. And, I'm a person who loves storytelling. I've been telling stories now for, I don't know, since I could read. And I just really wanted to create a space where disabled people of color, specifically Black disabled people, feel safe enough to talk about themselves and talk about what they go through and what they hope for. And at the end of every episode that I do, I ask people, what's your disabled power? And what is the thing that gives you the most agency in your disability? It's not necessarily about a superpower, but it's about the thing that kind of makes you thrive and survive and live your life as authentically as possible. And so, I didn't want to give it away, but I will give it away. Thomas's disabled power, he talks about adaptation, and he talks about the ability to pivot and how that's created a whole other kind of awareness in himself. So I just thought, like thinking about those kinds of topics and kind of, what's the word I want to use? Identities. It's just so important. It's so important for us as disabled folks to really talk about who we are and what we want to see in the world. So that's that's what I want to offer as well.
And Bri, you have to say before we move on your own superpower.
Yeah. Do I? I think my power, my disabled power is just my ability, my genuine desire to want to connect with folks, with other disabled people.
That's fantastic. Tiffany, should I come back to you and ask about, before we get too far away from the reference?
Yes, Paul Longmore. So I have the formal one that just showed up that said Paul K. Longmore was a professor of history, an author and notable disability activist who taught at San Francisco State University. They've now named a center at SF at San Francisco State University after him. But I was doing a little more digging. This is the fun part about being a podcaster, right? Is you get to do a lot of like digging and research into your guests and their background stories. But there's just a sentence here that I'll read, and it says, Longmore's career also exemplified constraints that he consistently turned into teachable moments. I just appreciated that.
Yeah. And that I am going to move on to Andrew. Would you like to set up your clip? And it is the actual clip you sent.
Sure. I loved this clip. I got the chance to, I started a series back, I want to say a year and a half ago, called What Would Happen to You If You Became Disabled Tomorrow. where I talk to queer, non-disabled men about what would happen to them if they became disabled tomorrow. Because I've noticed throughout my whole life as a queer disabled person that there's so much ableism in the LGBTQ community, and I wanted to find a new way. Actually, I was running out of content for my podcast. I was like, what am I going to do now? I have to do an episode. So I decided to reach out to non-disabled gay men and really put them on the spot and ask them about, okay, well, if you were to wake up tomorrow and acquire a disability or become disabled, how do you think your sex life would change? What are you afraid of? What does that scare you? Does it make you uncomfortable? And so that's kind of where the idea for the series came from. And then Dan Savage reached out to me one day and was like, do you want to write for one of my articles? And I was like, sure, that's cool. And then I said, well, if I've done something for you, can you do something for me? Would you come on my show? And so he said, sure. And I said, I really want to interrogate this question with you. How do you feel about that? And so that's kind of what this clip sets up.
Thanks, Alisa. For those who don't know Dan Savage, I'll just say many, many things, right? But columnist of, say, Savage Love and syndicated in many publications. Okay, and we're going to share my screen once more, the last time. And okay.
So I wanted to kind of...
Can you hear it?
Yeah. Okay. Into the questions that I have for you as a disabled gay man. I'm curious, how do you think, like, so let's say that tomorrow you woke up and disability, you encountered it in some way in your body. How do you think you would, let's say you were a wheelchair user, how do you think you would feel about that?
Am I allowed to say great, at least initially?
Yeah, I mean, you totally are. That's kind of what I want to interrogate with you.
That would be a difficult adjustment for me.
That's it. I don't know. I thought that was such a great moment. So congratulations. Oh, you're muted.
He goes on to say a lot more in that episode, and he talks about his discomfort, and I very gently and politely guided him through and said, okay, tell me more about that. Why does it make you uncomfortable? And that's exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have with him. And I was terrified to have him on the show because he is gay male canon of, he's very, very popular in our community. So when he said yes, I freaked out. So the fact that I got to speak with him for an hour and really ask him to consider all these things was terrifying, but I also thought it was really important because he also epitomizes white gay male privilege. And so it was really interesting to have him sit across from me digitally and really think about those questions. And when he said I wasn't comfortable and I wouldn't feel great, I was like, amazing. Why? And so as a storyteller, that was a fantastic opportunity for me.
It's wonderful. And I also want to tell you, Andrew, I think I told you this some months ago in an email, but there is a movie about Andrew, a documentary, and tell me the name again, Andrew. Picture This, is that it?
Yes.
Okay. It's Canadian, and it's required viewing now for all the students I work with in the All Abilities Media Project.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You told me, I forgot. That's great.
Yeah, it's just very tender, and it's Andrew's search for intimacy, right? And all the hurdles that come up. And it's I say college students are interested in sex, well, I mean, everybody is, but like they're especially, I think, like exploring and learning, and for them to make that connection with you, with a person with a disability, and hear that, it's very meaningful, and they get it. If we can start with that shared element of humanity, we can move on to the infrastructure, which isn't as fun to talk about, and those kinds of things. So, Andrew, why did you start your podcast?
Really similar to what Emily said. I didn't see myself represented anywhere. I didn't see sex and disability being talked about, not just queerness, but sex and disability particularly not being really talked about. And I was doing a lot of writing for places like HuffPo, and I was doing a lot of typing. And with my level of disability, sometimes typing can be really arduous and really hard to do, and it was getting uncomfortable to constantly be typing. And I was like, you know what? I want to take all these articles that I have, that I've written over the years, and turn them into a podcast. Let me just try. Let me just see what's out there. And I did my homework to see, is there another podcast out there like this? And there wasn't. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to jump in and just try. And, you know, similar to what Tiffany said, I didn't have 6 months of my recordings. I just have my Apple headphone jacks, and I had no equipment, and I just went and did it. And it surely sounded horrible, but I was like, at least it's out there. And I was really proud to just start.
Thank you. I previously worked at NPR, so I try to, you know, I have baggage that I feel like I need this. Alisa, I invited you to be on a Valid podcast about an hour before I started it. It was the first week of the pandemic. And so I should say, like, why did you say yes? And why did you come back the next couple months?
Well, we had, right before the pandemic started, we had started a podcast through Unabridged Press called Around the World in 80 As. So I was already invested in doing podcast work with Unabridged Press. And, you know, it sounded like a great opportunity because at that point there wasn't much being talked about with COVID and disability, but especially, you know, there's almost nothing out there in general talking about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and especially talking with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Whereas with Unabridged Press, you know, there's, oh gosh, I suddenly can't think of her name.
Erin Gannon.
Erin, thank you. Erin Gannon is a woman with Down syndrome who has her own show, basically doing interviews with people, and you know, they already have such a great precedent set up for that I was delighted to be part of something that was so inclusive. And so, you know, making sure that we're taking in new perspectives that aren't talked about as much.
And I'm gonna Erin wasn't able to be here tonight, but I'm going to brag on her for a moment. She's the reason that I'm here tonight, and Alisa, because Erin, I have a parallel career as a direct support provider in group homes with people with intellectual disabilities. And Erin said to me at one point, I heard you were on the radio and I want to do that. I was like, okay, let's start doing it. And honestly, I had thought about the people I worked with and how cool it would be to get their voices out there and their stories. But, you know, you can't go into your work as a group home and be like, can you start telling me your story for the world to hear? It's just not, you know, that's a quick way to get fired. So it really took like that moment of her knowing what she wanted and asking me for it. And she's since won 2 journalism awards from the Press Club of Western Pennsylvania. So we are working to continue to have Erin on our program. She's actually done like 3 interviews in the last week about various organizations that Special Olympics has held a, you know, virtual Special Olympics. The various organizations that she does, particularly like sports and social activities with, that now are laying off 100 people at a time, you know, and financially they're really struggling. So she's talking to them about these things. I would like to play from our podcast. Funny enough, when I tried to play it on the show, it didn't work, the audio, but it's the kind of thing that I think is maybe a little different. I mean, I come from a journalism background and several of us do. And the model is we're working in connection with Alisa, and we're always trying to figure out where does journalism end and analysts begin, and try to make that work and be transparent about it. So the piece I want to share is from an activist, Perry Judovic. She's in Pennsylvania, and forgetting her title, but she's with a Center for Independent Living. And when she spoke at a disability task force meeting for the state, I was just really blown away by it. And I I wanted people to hear it. I ended up reading it that night. That's another terrible podcaster tip. If your audio doesn't work, just read the quote and try and sound like the person. Let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna share this, and you can tell me if you can hear.
And people are dying.
Can you hear that? Okay.
Just like in a hurricane, and the waters are rising, and people are dying. And that's what we're looking at. And we're standing here in awe, listening to a state telling us that, they don't have enough staff to take care of people with rising waters. And it's shocking to us. You have to understand that this is shocking to us.
To me, that's just such an example of the power of audio. It's her voice to me is just so strong, and I could listen to her for an hour, and just what she had to say. What she's talking about is nursing homes. And as we know, the number of people who have been lost in nursing homes, and when we talk about people with nursing homes, we're talking about people with disabilities who are generally the poorest of the poor, of different age groups. And so that's the kind of thing I think as a journalist, I look for, like those, what's in a meeting that I can, bring in, and we of course do bring in guests too. But I want to say, as a tangent from that, Alisa and I were talking a little bit about, what's the difference between us? Okay, we're not CBS News, but I'm like, but I want to be CBS News. But the real question that I actually have for all of you is, do you see your podcast as a launching point to journalism or something? Does it not matter to you? I mean, I think all of us, at least I would like to see on CBS News or wherever, all the major news networks, more people who look like the people I'm looking at right now. So I think, Tiffany, if you don't mind, I'll start with you with that question.
Sure. I think for me, the biggest thing is I feel like the people who follow my work or I feel like I sit in a little bit of an echo chamber. And so what I aim to do, and by echo chamber, I mean, I've been doing disability work since 2009. I have this organization. Out of that disability organization came some other disability things. And then I'm on this council that's a disability thing as well. And I guess what I see my podcast doing is, how can I bring conversations that I think are really important and meaningful and bring them to people who wouldn't normally get access to them. So that's an example, and this is a very brief tangent. I remember at the beginning of June, I posted something, and then through some of my other social channels, I posted Black Lives Matter and the actions that I personally was taking and my organization was going to take. And a lot of the responses I got were, oh, I understand what discrimination is like because I'm disabled, and things like that. And it was like, how can we navigate those conversations within the circles of influence that I know I'm in? And how can I bring in some different perspectives so that we can start to challenge what we think different experiences are like, or different social issues are like. So it'd be cool. Yeah, it would be cool if, Tiffany and you made it to CBS level or NPR level. But yeah, I think for right now, I'm just like, how can I provide a platform for really important conversations that I think people need to hear who aren't hearing them because it's just one or two degrees separated from the circles that they're normally operating in.
You mentioned NPR, and I am hopeful, because there was a time, even a few years ago, when I worked in an NPR affiliate, you would not have heard the voices that you hear now. Everybody sounded the same. There were a couple, Sylvia Poggioli, she could sound Italian or whatever, but you're hearing, I think, more voices from around the world and more voices from different parts of the country. I'm hearing more inflection, so I think that's a good thing. Bri, any thoughts?
Definitely. I think this is such a good question. when I'm thinking about media corporations like CBS and NBC or even Stitcher, I actually was the 2019 Stitcher fellow for sound engineering, and thank you. So, I learned a little bit about, what corporate podcasting looks like. And, honestly, I don't care about, being aligned with NBC or Stitcher or any of those other really big name media networks, because honestly, they don't care about my voice. I mean, people are starting to talk about Black lives and how, Black people have been missing from the important conversations that need to be had, right? But for me, I just feel like I'm already creating those spaces and I don't need to cater to bigger corporations for what they need, because they are the ones who have always kept me out. So why would I want to cater to that, For me, what would give me more what's the word I'm looking for? What would give me more hope and uplift me more is the idea that, people on the bottom rung, people are the most multiply marginalized, can find the show and feel safe and feel seen and heard and reflected, where's the story of the little Black disabled trans girl who's dealing with CP and trying to navigate that, I don't see that on CBS. I don't expect to see that. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Okay, that is a great answer. I want to say, does anybody on this call know who Joshua Johnson is? No, man, I must be old or something. So Joshua Johnson was on 1A on NPR for the last few years, replaced Diane Rehm, Black gay man, just a wonderful radio voice. And he has now moved into the realm of, I'm going to say NBC. I'm not actually sure, but it's just been cool for me to see, look what's opening up and the progression of, he's so darn good, and they snatched him up. So, Andrew, do you have any thoughts on, I guess you would be on the CNBC, the Canadian everything.
So close, but I don't think CNBC is Canadian. You mean CBC? CBC, yeah. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, yeah. I love it. It's great. I'm super Canadian. But to answer the larger question, when I first started, funnily enough, before I started podcasting, I listened to a lot of NPR and I listened to a lot of Serial, and that was my first foray into what a podcast was. Serial and true crime and super professional, super slick edited, super really cool transitions. That's what I thought a podcast was. So when I first started, I didn't have any of that. And I was really upset that my show wasn't pulling in huge numbers. And why didn't I have 1 million subscribers? And why didn't I? And how come? And then as I started doing
I think we all feel you on that. At least I do. Yeah.
I felt like I was really upset for a while, but then I would get letters from people who said, I listened to your show and it keeps me grounded. It makes me smile. It makes me feel connected to my community. And I love what you do. And thank you for your show. And thank you for putting it out there. And that meant and still means so much more to me than a huge subscription deal or sponsorship or any of that, because it means that my little show that I make from my bedroom is helping somebody feel seen. And that's really so much more powerful. So much like Bri said, I don't care if I never get picked up. I don't care if I never go international. I don't care, because I've already done it through people just finding me. And that means so much more to me than anything else.
That's a great answer. Emily.
Sure. So I would say that Kyle and I never started the podcast with the intent of becoming picked up by mainstream media. It's just not something that we're particularly interested in. I think, echoing what a lot of the other panelists have said, a larger priority for us is really reaching one person at a time. And so if we get an email from someone, which we do quite frequently, saying, I really felt like I was in the same room as you and I was talking back to you the whole time, and I have all these thoughts that I want to share with you, and I felt like we were actually having a conversation, that means more to me than being picked up by any outlet. That being said, you know, I think it's a really great goal, and I'd love to see more disabled podcasters, especially multi-marginalized disabled podcasters, in the mainstream podcasting space. But for our show, it's been only a labor of love, really, and we wouldn't want it to be subjected to, you know, broader corporate media rules or things like that, because that's kind of right now what allows disabled people to put their perspectives out there without having overt or covert censorship imposed upon them by mainstream media that's not yet ready to have the difficult conversations about disability, and especially about disability as it pertains to other marginalized identities that, you know, people are still uncomfortable talking about. And would I love to see that in mainstream media? Absolutely. But I also think that there's something to be said for carving out spaces that belong to you as a disabled person. And it's hard because I know Tiffany mentioned the echo chamber, and I feel like I'm in an echo chamber all the time, but sometimes the bubble is nice. So I'd like us to reach outside the bubble, and in many cases we have, but sometimes there's just a good feeling in knowing that you are not alone, and that you as another disabled person have a place to go and something to listen to that makes you feel like you're understood in a way that a mainstream podcast probably wouldn't make you feel. So yeah, for us, it's really about meeting people where they are and not about trying to grow.
Yes. Thank you. So we have just 2 more minutes left, and I did want to ask Ty to talk for maybe a single minute. And I'm not sure about the answer to this, but I said that we do podcast workshops out of Point Park. What tips are you giving people, if anyone's listening to this, who wants to start a podcast at home? What kind of advice?
Well, really, what we've been doing the entire pandemic is using Zoom as a launching point. Something like this, it's just like anything that can record. I mean, Adobe Audition is $9.99 somewhere. If you have a student discount, it's going to be free. It's largely just finding anything. It could be your computer. It can be your gaming headset like I have right now. Anything that can get sound out there, and you want to just use your voice if the content doesn't matter.
And you've been transitioning people from the fancy podcast studio down there in Pittsburgh to their homes. And so what do you think about the setups? Anything you would offer technically? How, you know, some of us have these, some of us have earbuds, or
I always say that it's just like, even if it's something like this, it's largely, if it can record your voice, that's the most important thing, because these days it's quality is out the door. It's like, even with this right now, it's like I look purple even though I'm wearing maroon right now. It's just like, you really
did warn us.
Yeah, I did warn you, and it's him, by the way. But just it's just about going like, you know what? It's not enough. It's not much, but it's enough to get me here.
And you sound great. What are you using?
I'm using a Turtle Beach PS4 headset.
Okay. Oh, we got some thumbs up there. Okay, we are at time. I wonder if we could just run around the circle and everybody say your website where you'd like people to go. Bri?
Definitely. Find me at powernotpity.com.
Tiffany?
You can go to tiffanyyu.com/podcast. So it's just my first and last name.com/podcast.
Andrew?
AndrewGerza.com/podcast.
And Emily?
theaccessiblestall.com.
Okay, fantastic. And we are at avalidpodcast.com and unabridgedpress.com. Oh,
Alisa.
you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Unabridgedpress.com. And okay, unabridgedpress.com and avalidpodcast.com. We're always working to make it better. Thank you all. This was really quite wonderful. And I just hope we maybe do this again. You know, there can be a Podcasters Unite too. And
anytime.
I was saying to Alisa, we can talk about uniting more. Like, what if we were all on a similar platform, or we, you know, that kind of, we all have to be on each other's show at some point. So thank you so much.
I want to make disability podcasting so big that they emblazon a wheelchair on the moon. That's how big I want disability podcasting to be.
I love that.
Vicki Landers is here. Are you going to jump back in? Vicki Landers, the leader of the Disability Pride Pennsylvania and Philadelphia movement, to wrap us up here.
Thank you, all of you, for joining me tonight. I was so excited when I had the thought of doing this podcasting, and I was like, oh, my head, I'm like, okay, I need this person, and I was so excited about even some of the new ones that I found while I was doing some research. So we definitely will keep these going. Since Disability Pride Philadelphia will be doing regularly scheduled programming. So we will definitely be doing this again, but I want to thank you all again for coming, for sharing in this space and about yourselves. I'm putting all of your information up on Facebook and on our website so people can get to your podcasts. And I want to thank Mimi and Rita Jo, who are our interpreters, and Alan, who is our captioner, for doing an amazing job again tonight. And I want to say thank you to everybody who came out on Facebook. There was a lot of people here on Facebook tonight, so very exciting to me. And we will all see you for another Disability Pride Virtual PA tomorrow. Thanks.